The road out of my property was barely a road at all, just a narrow strip of cracked asphalt that twisted to the pines like a spine. And for years it was peaceful, quiet, mine. But that morning, when I rounded the bend, I saw something that froze me mid-step. A line of orange barricades. A group of strangers in neon vests, clipboards, hard hats, and a giant metal sign that wasn't there last night. Road closed. HOA authorized personnel only. That was the moment I realized someone had just declared war on me. I wish I could tell you I handled it calmly. I didn't, because in the back of my mind, a truth echoed louder than my own heartbeat. They didn't just block a road. They blocked my only way out. And worse, I wasn't even part of their HOA. That road, that land, every tree around it was fully mine. So how the hell did they think they could trap me on my own property? Before I confronted them, before I spoke a single word, I replayed everything that led to this moment. The warnings, the notices, the threats. A part of me knew I should have seen it coming. They'd been circling me for months. But I didn't expect they would actually do it. I didn't expect they would go Machiavellian. I walked toward the barricade, each step heavier than the last, my mind linking the hook of this story with the reality unfolding right in front of me. Sometimes the people who insist on controlling you aren't villains from the outside. They're neighbors who convince themselves they own your choices. And today, they thought they owned mine. The moment their leader turned toward me, clipboard tucked under his arm, reflective vest shining in the sun, I realized he wasn't just confident. He was rehearsed, prepared, expecting me, almost like they'd been waiting for this confrontation. "Sir, this road is now under HOA control," he said before I even reached him. "You'll need to abide by our access policy moving forward." Access policy. For my own land. He said it like it was obvious, like the universe had always worked that way. I didn't even get a hello. "What are you talking about?" I said, "This is my property. You can't just..." He held up his hand. Not politely. Like a traffic cop stopping a civilian. Like someone who believed he had jurisdiction. "Ownership disputes are being processed," he announced. "Until then, HOA rules apply, and you will follow them." My blood heated instantly. Ownership disputes? I'm not disputing anything. I own all of this. You're trespassing. Behind him, one of the workers chuckled under his breath. They thought I was bluffing. They thought they could intimidate me into submission. I leaned forward just enough for the leader to take a step back, move the barricades. "No," he said, not hesitant, not unsure. An absolute no from someone who thought he'd already won. That's when I noticed a smaller sign zip-tied under the main one. New HOA expansion map, effective immediately. The map covered my road, my trees, my driveway. They had literally drawn my land into their HOA borders without permission. A slow whistle escaped the guy holding the drill. "You really should have signed a compliance packet when you had the chance," he said. "Would have saved you trouble." Compliance packet. The one I threw away last month because it was addressed to the future residents of Oak Crest Village, a neighborhood 2 miles away. It wasn't an offer. It was a warning. They were expanding, and I was in their way. The leader crossed his arms. "Listen carefully. Oak Crest HOA now manages the shared community pathways." "There is no community." I shot back. "There is now," he said, "and as a new member..." "I'm not a member, but you will obey our regulations." The rage rose so quickly I could taste metal. "Move." The barricades. The leader didn't answer. Instead, he pulled a folded sheet of paper from his clipboard and held it out like a police warrant. "This is a temporary directive. Per Section 12B, you are required to comply with all HOA mobility restrictions." Mobility restrictions. They were regulating my ability to leave my own home. "Your road failed the safety inspection," he added. "Until we complete authorized repairs, it remains closed." Authorized repairs? They weren't fixing anything. They were tightening the cage. "And if I ignore your restrictions?" I asked. His smile stretched. A long, self-satisfied grin that made every instinct in me sharpen. "Then you will face consequences," he said, "starting with fines." escalating if necessary. Escalating. What did that even mean? Before I could grab the paper out of his hand, an engine rumbled from behind the barricade. A truck rolled forward, towing a flatbed loaded with industrial fencing panels. Steel, heavy, tall. They weren't just blocking the road. They were about to seal it permanently. I lunged forward. Hey! 2 workers stepped in front of me like bodyguards. The leader raised his voice. Install the panels. Clanging metal erupted as the workers began unloading the fence sections. I moved to stop them, but one of the guys stepped directly into my path, shoulders squared, jaw clenched. "You don't want to do that," he muttered. "It's my land," I said. "I'll do whatever I—" "You touch that fence," he whispered, "and we call law enforcement." I froze, not because I was scared of cops, but because calling the police meant one thing. The HOA had already prepared a story, and I bet it cast me as the aggressor. They were setting a trap, a legal one, Machiavellian as hell. The leader tapped the paper in his hand. "Last warning, Mr. Hale. Cooperate or consequences will escalate." My heart hammered. "You don't have the authority." "We do now," he said. "You just haven't accepted it yet." Another panel slammed into place. Another. The fence was rising fast, tall enough to block visibility, heavy enough to block vehicles, locked enough to trap someone inside. They weren't bluffing. They were effectively imprisoning me. And then the leader leaned in and whispered something that chilled me deeper than the fence ever could. "Obey us, and you'll get your freedom of movement back. Until then," he stepped away with a smirk, "you stay exactly where we want you." My fists curled so tight they trembled. "You think you own me?" "We own everything inside our map," he replied. "And that includes your road." My pulse roared in my ears. I had 2 choices. Fight them head-on and risk being painted as the aggressor. Stay calm and find a smarter way to dismantle their entire operation. But before I could choose, I noticed something. A small device strapped to one of the fence posts. A blinking red light. Not a camera. A sensor. They weren't just blocking my road. They were tracking movement. And then I realized something far worse. This wasn't about land. This wasn't about rules. This was about control. And they had just declared me their first target. Before I could react, one of the workers yelled, "Get the lock!" A steel chain swung into view. They were going to lock me in. I took a step back. Then another. My heart slammed against my ribs as the leader pointed at me. "Record him," he said. "Make sure we have footage if he resists." 3 phones lifted at once. I knew then that whatever happened next would be used against me. And that's when I saw the truck behind them starting to reverse, lining up the final fence panel. If that panel went up, I'd be sealed inside, completely trapped. I had seconds, maybe less. And in that moment, I made a decision that shocked even me. I turned and ran. Not away, not back home, but into the woods beside the road, slipping between the trees before they could shut the trap on me. I heard shouting behind me. Footsteps, branches snapping. They were chasing me, on my own land. And right when I thought I'd lost them, right when the forest fell silent, a voice whispered right behind me. "We knew you'd run." The voice was close enough that I felt the breath hit the back of my neck. I spun around instantly, fists raised, adrenaline exploding through my veins. But no one was there. Only trees. Only silence. Only the faint echo of someone moving swiftly between the pines. For a moment, I wondered if the HOA had brought private security, or hired some overzealous volunteer who took neighborhood politics way too seriously. But the whisper hadn't sounded like a stranger. It had sounded deliberate, practiced, almost theatrical. Branches crackled to my left, then to my right, then behind me. They weren't chasing in a line. They were surrounding me. I inhaled slowly, grounded myself the same way I used to when tension spiked during my old contracting jobs, when clients lied, when inspectors pushed bribes, when greedy developers tried pulling fast ones. People with clipboards could be more dangerous than people with guns, because they hid their attacks behind paper and policy. And these HOA people, they were weaponizing both. I stepped backward until my shoulder brushed the trunk of a pine. My eyes scanned the shadows between the branches, looking for outlines, movement, anything. Then, in a tone too calm for chaos unfolding, someone said, "You should have just signed the packet." A figure stepped out from behind a tree. Broad shoulders, dark jacket, gloved hands. Not the vest-wearing workers. Not the clipboard leader. Someone else. My pulse hammered. "Who the hell are you?" He didn't answer. He simply tilted his head, like a predator studying prey that confused it. "You're trespassing," I warned. He smiled, slow, controlled, confident. "On whose land?" "Mine." "Not anymore." The words hit like ice water. Before I could respond, another figure stepped out behind him. Then another. 3 total. None of them looked like construction workers. These weren't HOA volunteers. These were hired enforcers, private, trained, direct. Someone with money had decided to escalate. I swallowed hard, masking the rising fury. The HOA hired you to do what? Intimidate me into compliance. "We enforce the board decisions," the man said, "especially when someone refuses to cooperate. I never agreed to your board. That's the problem." They began spreading out, flanking me, cutting off every retreat except deeper into the forest. I shifted my stance, ready for a rush. "If you touch me, that's assault. If you resist," the leader said, "that's interference with community safety operation." I almost laughed. You people twist words better than politicians. "It's not twisting," he said. "It's policy." That word again. Policy. A shield they use like a weapon. He gestured behind me. "You ran. Running implies guilt. Running implies I don't feel like being illegally imprisoned on my own land. Temporary mobility restriction," he corrected calmly. "All within our rights. My property deed says otherwise." His smile sharpened. "Your deed is being reviewed." That stopped me cold. Reviewed by who? I demanded. "The HOA Legal Committee. You don't have jurisdiction to review anything of mine." "That's where you're wrong," he said, stepping closer. "We assumed jurisdiction when we expanded the boundary map. You can't just draw a line on a paper and claim land. You'd be surprised what we can do with signatures." He tapped his temple. "And we already got one." My stomach dropped. "Whose signature?" He didn't answer, which told me everything. They forged something. Or they pressured someone. Either way, the HOA wasn't freelancing. They were executing a coordinated takeover. I took a slow breath. "Move aside. I'm walking out of here." "No," he said simply. "You're coming with us." He motioned for the others. They stepped closer. Every instinct told me this wasn't the moment to fight. Not here, not outnumbered, not while cameras and sensors recorded everything. They wanted me to snap. They wanted footage of me throwing a punch. They wanted a narrative they could control. So I pivoted and sprinted, not toward home, not toward the road, but deeper into the woods, toward the creek that cut through my land. The current was fast today. The banks were muddy. Tracks wouldn't last long. If I could lose them there, I could circle back wide, come up behind the barricade, and get evidence of their illegal fencing. Behind me, the men crashed through the brush, moving fast. "You're only making this harder," one shouted. That was the point. The creek roared louder as I closed in. I leapt across a fallen log, ducked under low branches, boots pounding the earth. The forest blurred into streaks of brown and green. Then the ground vanished beneath me. I slid down a slope slick with wet leaves, tumbling hard, twisting sideways until I slammed onto the creek's bank with a painful smack. The taste of dirt and pine filled my mouth. Footsteps thundered down the slope behind me. I scrambled upright and ran into the shallow water, splashing hard, letting the current swallow my tracks. The men reached the shore seconds later. He went into the creek. No visual. Keep moving downstream. Perfect. I moved upstream instead. The water numbed my legs as I pushed against the current, staying close to the overhang of roots where their sight lines were blocked. My breathing steadied, my mind clearing as a panic drained, replaced by strategy. I needed information. I needed documentation. I needed to know who was behind this, because this wasn't about rules or landscaping or neighborhood aesthetics. This was a takeover masked as community management. Machiavelli would have been proud, once their footsteps faded. I climbed out of the water and moved silently between the trees. My clothes dripped, leaving faint marks, but with the forest floor this damp, the tracks would vanish quickly. 5 minutes later, I reached a ridge overlooking the blocked road. There they were. The fence now stretched completely across the asphalt. The final panel was being locked into place. Workers tightened bolts. Phones recorded everything. The leader leaned against a barricade, looking entirely too pleased with himself. I studied the scene carefully. The fence wasn't temporary. Anchors drilled into the pavement. Concrete ballast blocks added for stability. Metal supports angled against the frame. They weren't blocking the road for repairs. They were closing it permanently. Then something caught my eye. A small tent just off the shoulder. A folding table. A laptop. Stacks of folders. A field office. And next to it, a portable printer was spitting out freshly typed documents. Paperwork they planned to use against me. I needed to get closer. I needed proof. I descended the ridge slowly, moving silently through brush until I was within 20 yards of tent. Voices drifted through the air, sharp, annoyed, tense. He ran into the woods. Don't worry, the mobility order covers it. But if he goes to the county, he won't reach the county, the leader snapped. We'll have the paperwork finalized before he gets anywhere near them. What about the boundary map? Already filed. The homeowner rights transfer is next. My pulse spiked. Transfer? They were trying to strip my ownership. The worker hesitated. Are we sure doing this without notifying him is legal? The leader laughed. Legal? Please. Everything's legal if you write it on letterhead. The others laughed too. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. They weren't just corrupt. They were confident, reckless, certain no one would challenge them. I stepped closer, hiding behind a thick trunk. One more thing, the leader said. Did we get the signature? Yes, someone replied. Well, sorta. That word chilled me. Define sorta, the leader said. It's the signature, just not his. The leader exhaled slowly. Does it look convincing? Convincing enough for the county clerk. My stomach turned. Forgery. Of my name. Filed as official documentation. This was beyond Machiavellian. This was criminal. The leader's radio crackled. Team Bravo here. We lost him in the woods. Keep searching, he ordered. He can't hide forever. I looked at the tent, the printer, the folders, the files they were preparing. If I could get just one piece of evidence, one forged document, I could shut down their entire operation. But before I could make a move, a shadow crossed the ground beside me. I froze. A voice whispered quietly, inches behind my ear, "You shouldn't be here." I turned slowly. It wasn't an enforcer. It wasn't a worker. It was a woman, mid-40s, calm eyes, wearing a dark jacket that matched the hired man, but without their hostility. She raised a finger to her lips. Quiet as it. Then she said words that froze my blood and flipped everything upside down. I'm not with them. And if you want to survive this, you need to come with me right now. I stared at the woman. My breath caught somewhere between shock and instinct. The way she stood, steady, alert, aware of every sound around us, told me she wasn't a neighbor stumbling through the woods. And the way her eyes flicked toward the tent, then back to me, told me she knew things the HOA didn't want me knowing. Who are you? I whispered. Later, she said, voice low but firm. If they see you here, they'll claim you were tampering with official documents. They'll arrest you before sunset. I haven't done anything illegal. That won't matter, she said. Come on. I didn't move. I studied her, really studied her. Her boots, her jacket, the discreet earpiece tucked under her hair. Not military, not police, but definitely trained. You're not HOA, I said. No. And you're out of time. The urgency in her tone hit harder than her words. She grabbed my sleeve, not roughly but with purpose, and pulled me deeper into the trees. We moved quickly, silently, weaving through brush like she knew every path by heart. Only when we were far enough that the workers' voices faded did she finally release my arm and turn toward me. "They're escalating faster than I expected," she said. "Blocking your road was supposed to happen next week." Someone pushed the timeline. "Why?" I asked. "Why target me?" She hesitated before answering. "Because you're the only landowner who refused to sign. Everyone else caved." I blinked. "Caved? To what?" "To the annexation," she said. "Oak Crest HOA is trying to convert all properties within a mile radius into mandatory members. They're redrawing borders illegally and forcing people into compliance. Anyone who resists becomes a problem. And they handle problems with armed enforcers?" I asked. She gave a quiet, bitter laugh. "Those aren't HOA volunteers. They're contractors hired by the board president. Someone with money, influence, and a taste for domination." The words sank into me like stones. "Who's the president?" I asked. Her expression tightened. "Landon Pierce." The name punched the air right out of my lungs. "You know him," she said, reading my face instantly. "Everyone knows him." I muttered. "Real estate developer. Runs half the businesses in town. Buys out land, flips it, builds luxury neighborhoods. And uses HOA boards as his enforcement tool," she added. "He can't build on your property unless you're part of the HOA. So he's going to force you in." I stared at her. "And you? Why are you helping me?" She hesitated again, not dodging, but choosing her words carefully. "Because I used to work for them." A beat of silence stretched between us. "You work for the HOA?" "For the security contractor," she clarified. "I handled internal compliance oversight. But when I saw how far Pierce was willing to go, I walked away before he turned me into another weapon." I crossed my arms. "Why war me now?" "Because you're the only one who hasn't folded. And because you're not safe. They're planning something worse." I didn't like the way she said worse. "What exactly?" She gestured for me to follow and started walking again. I trailed a few steps behind until we reached a narrow clearing with an old hunting cabin tucked between the trees. Remote, hidden, the kind of place nobody would look unless they knew it was there. Inside, she shut the door, locked it, then pulled a folder from a metal case in the corner. She opened it on a small table, revealing copies of documents, HOA letters, maps, property annexation forms, all stamped, dated, and signed, including a document with my name forged at the bottom. "Where did you get these?" I asked. "I was assigned to destroy them," she said. "I didn't." I picked up the page with my forged signature. My stomach twisted. The scrawl wasn't even close to mine, but from a distance, it would pass. Especially if filed with a clerk who didn't care, or was paid not to notice. "This is enough to charge them," I said. "Forgery, fraud, trespassing." "You're assuming law enforcement isn't compromised," she cut in. "Pierce funds half the campaigns in this county. You think the sheriff's office is going to challenge him because of the signature?" I didn't answer, because deep down I knew she was right. She flipped to another document. "Look at this." It was a compliance enforcement directive. My name was printed at the top. Subject displays aggressive tendencies. I read aloud. "Risk assessment elevated. Recommend mobility restrictions, perimeter monitoring, and mandatory integration." Mandatory integration. They were planning to force me into the HOA. "That doesn't even sound legal," I said. "It isn't," she said. "But they don't need legal. They need leverage. This document lets them justify anything they do next: detainment, fines, even restraining orders." "For what?" "Existing. For resisting," she said. "And Pierce hates resistance." I exhaled slowly. "What's his end game?" "He wants your land. All of it, not just the road." I frowned. "Why mine specifically?" "Because your property sits on the only northern access route. If he gets control of it, he can build the new gated community he's been planning. If he doesn't, the project dies. So he's cornered." I said. "No," she corrected. "You are." A cold prickle ran along my spine. "Pierce already assumes you'll fight," she continued. "And he wants you to. If you retaliate, he uses your reaction as justification. If you stay quiet, he boxes you in until you break. Either way, he wins. Not necessarily, I said. Not if we expose him. She gave me a strange look. You brought me here. You showed me evidence. You said you wanted to stop him. I do, she said. But you need to understand something. Pierce is 3 steps ahead. He already planned for you escaping into the woods. He planned for you refusing the barricade. He even planned for you to search for proof. That chilled me. What makes you so sure? I asked. She moved to a small window and pointed toward the ridge. Through the trees, barely visible, a glint of something metallic reflected the light. Do you see that? She asked. I squinted. A camera, mounted high, camouflaged, facing directly toward the cabin. He's watching. I whispered. Not impersonally, she said. His system, motion triggers, facial recognition. You stepping onto the side of the forest set off a chain of alerts. So they know I'm here. They know you're somewhere nearby, she corrected. This cabin is shielded. Pierce doesn't know it exists. But the moment you step outside, they'll resume tracking. You're not safe here for long. My jaw tightened. Then what's the plan? Her expression hardened. We expose him before he gets what he wants. But first, she opened a drawer and pulled out a flash drive. This contains everything. The documents, emails, surveillance notes, internal directives. Enough to burn his entire operation down. I reached for it, but she didn't let go. Getting this to the right people is almost impossible, she said. Pierce's eyes everywhere. The HOA board, the contractors, even the clerk's office. We need someone outside the county, someone he can't silence. Fine, I said. Who? She looked at me for a long moment. You, she said. I blinked. Me? I can't just leave the property. They blocked the only road. That's why you're going to take a path they don't know about. Which is... She stepped toward a section of the cabin's floor and pulled up a heavy wooden panel, revealing a dark, narrow tunnel descending into the earth. A hidden passage. Follow this underground, she said, and it'll lead you past their perimeter. Once you're out, head north until you reach Ridgepoint. There's someone there waiting for the drive. Waiting? How? She finally answered the question I'd been holding on to since I met her. Because you're not the first person Pierce has tried to erase, she said. And the others, they're fighting back. A chill ran through me and settled deep. You're part of something bigger, I whispered. For now, she said. But if you aren't out of this cabin in 3 minutes, we're both dead. Outside, a twig snapped. Then another. Then footsteps, heavy ones. The enforcers were close. Too close. She pushed the flash drive into my palm. Her fingers pressed hard, not in fear, but in absolute urgency. Go, she said. Now. But just before I climbed into the tunnel, just before I vanished into darkness, the cabin window exploded inward. A fist-sized metal canister flew through the air, and as it clattered across the floor, hissing gas. She screamed, "Move!" The gas burst into the room with a violent hiss, spreading like a fast-moving fog. My eyes burned instantly. The woman grabbed my shoulder and shoved me hard toward the tunnel. Go! Don't stop, she choked out, covering her face with her sleeve. I dropped into the tunnel, landing on the dirt floor. Above me, I heard heavy boots storm the cabin. The enforcers shouted orders, their voices muffled to the smoke and the narrow wooden opening. The woman slammed the hatch shut. Darkness collapsed around me. I crawled forward, fast, palms scraping against packed earth, my lungs still burning from the gas. The tunnel was tight, barely tall enough to crouch. Roots brushed my shoulders, and the air grew colder the deeper I went. Behind me, the cabin shook. Something heavy slammed into the floorboards. They were searching. They were close. I pushed on, the tunnel angling downward, twisting, curving like some old escape route carved decades ago. My breath echoed in the narrow space, each exhale trembling with adrenaline. Then, a thud above me, muffled voices, bootsteps directly overhead. They'd found the entry hatch. My heartbeat roared in my ears. I crawled faster. The tunnel sloped sharply, forcing me into a slide. Dirt scraped my palms as I skidded downward until the ground leveled again. My clothes were coated in dust. My head throbbed from the gas. But I kept moving. Minutes passed, maybe 10, maybe 15, until a faint, thin sliver of light appeared ahead. I reached the wooden board blocking the exit, braced my shoulder, and pushed. It didn't move. I pushed harder. Still nothing. Panic surged. I shoved with everything I had. The board snapped outward, and I stumbled into a thicket of tall brush. Sunlight poured over me like I'd surfaced from underwater. Fresh air, silence, freedom, at least for the moment. I climbed out fully and covered the tunnel entrance with leaves and branches. No one would notice unless they already knew exactly where to look. I checked the horizon. To the south, smoke rose just barely above the treetops. Gas grenades inside the cabin. To the east, I heard faint shouts. They were spreading out, searching wider. I headed north. Fast. Quiet. The forest here was thicker, older. Massive oaks twisted upward like natural barricades. The ground sloped gently until it leveled into a long stretch of mossy earth. Every sound felt sharpened. The crackle of a twig, the rustle of branches, even the beating of my own pulse. I moved nonstop for nearly half an hour before I reached the rocky ridge overlooking Ridgepoint. From up here, the small town looked peaceful, normal, completely unaware that an HOA was running a covert land grab like a hostile takeover. I scanned the rooftops. No enforcers, no barricades, no surveillance tents. This was my window. I descended into the outskirts, sticking to alleys and tree lines until I reached the back of an abandoned feed store. The woman had told me someone would be here, someone waiting for the flash drive. But who? I stepped inside the dim building. Dust floated through shafts of sunlight. The place was quiet, dead quiet. Then a voice from the shadows. "You made good time." I turned sharply. A man stepped out. Older, gray hair, rugged jacket. The kind of presence that told you he'd seen bad things and survived worse. He didn't introduce himself. He simply held out his hand. "The drive," he said. I hesitated. "How do I know I can trust you?" "Because you don't have a choice," he said. "Pierce's men will hit Ridgepoint within the hour. If you hold on to that evidence, they'll bury you with it. Literally." I studied him carefully. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't confused. He was prepared. And that meant he'd been fighting Pierce longer than I had. I handed him the flash drive. He pocketed it instantly. "Good. That's everything we need." I asked. He gestured to the rear door. When he opened it, 2 more people stood outside. Another woman, a man in work boots, both looking wary but determined. Others stepped out from behind vehicles. Then more, a dozen in total. Ordinary people, teachers, contractors, retirees, united by something bigger. They'd all been targeted by Pierce. All forced, all threatened, all stripped of something that was theirs. And now, they were done being afraid. "We've been gathering evidence for months," the older man said. "But Pierce always stays one step ahead. With what you brought, we can finally expose him at the state level. Once this hits the right offices, the HOA collapses." "Good," I said. "I want him gone." The man shook his head slowly. "You don't understand. He isn't gone yet, and he won't go quietly." A radio crackled on his hip. A voice spoke. "Pierce's men are closing in. They're setting up along the Ridgepoint trail." The man's jaw tightened. He must have tracked the movement in the woods. I stiffened. "They know I came north." "They suspect," he said, "which means we need to leave. Now." "Where?" I asked. "A safe house far from here," he said. "We take the evidence to people Pierce can't buy." He motioned for everyone to load up. Engines started. Doors slammed. The small group moved with precision, not military, not organized, but focused with the intensity of people who've been wronged one too many times. I climbed into a truck, but before the door closed, the older man stopped and looked back at Ridgepoint. Quiet, calm, unaware. "Pierce thinks he owns this county," he said. "But after today, The whole state is going to know what he really is. The caravan rolled out, heading toward a narrow back road that wound through the hills. We drove fast, the forest streaking past in blurs. Then a figure blocked the road. Tall, dark jacket, hands clasped behind his back. The enforcer stepped out from the trees behind him, and then, slowly, the figure lifted his head. Pierce. He smiled, like he'd been waiting for this moment. The older man slammed the brakes. The truck skidded to a halt, gravel flying. Pierce took a step forward. "You've caused quite a mess," he said, his voice calm and poison smooth. "All of you." I stepped out of the truck, fists clenched. Pierce's eyes locked on me. "You've been very inconvenient," he said. "But that ends now." Behind him, more enforcers emerged. More vehicles rolled into view. 12, 2. He had a small army. The older man beside me whispered, "Run." "No," I said. "I'm done running." Pierce lifted a small device in his hand. A remote. With one press, he could trigger anything. Roadblocks, reinforcements, or something far worse. He pressed a button. A siren blared in the distance, loud, echoing, unnatural. Pierce smiled wider. "This county belongs to me. And soon." He pointed at me. "So will you." A roar of engines split through the trees. But they weren't his. Vehicles burst on the road from the opposite side. State enforcement units, lights flashing, sirens screaming, scattering Pierce's men like startled animals. Behind them stepped uniformed officers. Real ones. Not bought, not owned. The woman from the cabin stepped out beside them. She pointed at Pierce. "You're done." His expression shattered. The officers rushed forward, tackling enforcers, seizing weapons, surrounding Pierce. He tried to back away, but he was cornered from every side. Finally, he was trapped in his own trap. The older man turned to me, a rare grin cracking his stern face. "You delivered the evidence just in time." I exhaled for the first time in what felt like forever. Pierce was cuffed, furious, screaming threats that held no power anymore. The forest was quiet again. The air finally felt free. I looked back at the ruined barricades, the trucks, the chaos turning into order, and then at the people who'd stood beside me. It wasn't just my fight anymore. It was bigger, but it was over. And as the sun lowered behind the ridge, one truth settled deep inside me. I would never let anyone control my land, my life, again, and neither should you. If you enjoyed this story and want more gripping HOA battles, real estate showdowns, and Machiavellian twists, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. You have not enough humanizer words left. Upgrade your surfer plan.